So another aspect that we also need to talk about now is about what ISA 530 sampling. And we have been talking about what sampling since the beginning of this course, since the beginning of this subject. That in audit, we are not checking the world, we are not checking the entire world, we are not checking the entire population. We are not checking the entire population. And that's one of the reasons why in assurance we can't give what we call what absolute assurance. We can only give reasonable assurance. Reasonable assurance in terms of what the financial statement show a what true and fair view or it doesn't show. We can't guarantee the users of the financial statement that this particular financial statement is 100% correct. So one of the reasons why we can't do that is as a result of the way we carry out the carry out the audit process. We use sampling. So when we say what sampling is that we are not checking the world, we are not checking the entire world, we are not checking the entire population. And for sampling to be what? For sampling to be appropriate, the population must be what? Must be homogeneous. For a sampling to be what? To be appropriate, the population has to be what? Has to be homogeneous in terms of what? Where all items in the population is what? Have the same characteristics. When we say something is what? Is homogeneous, it means that, oh, they have the same what? They have the same characteristics. So for me to conduct something that are what? That are very appropriate, the population has to be what? Has to be homogeneous. So we also have what another thing called what relationship between what we call what sampling and what we call what audit tricks. Sampling is the application of what audit procedure to less than what 100% of the item within the population. That is it. We all know the meaning of what sampling. So if we did not forget, when we talk about what audit tricks, we say that audit tricks is made up of three things. We have what we call inherent risks, we have what we call control risks, and we also have what we call what detection risk. And if you can still remember, I said that what detection risks arise as a result of what sampling. That is one of the reasons why we have detection risks. And among these risks now, inherent control and in detection risks, the only risk that the auditor have control over is what is detection risks. The only risk that the auditor have control over is what is detection risk. Inherent and control risk is what is outside the control of the auditor. The only risk that you have control over is what is detection risk. And how can you control these risks? How can you reduce these risks? Risk cannot be eliminated. Risk can only be reduced to the barest minimum. So as the auditor now, you have control over detection risk. How can you reduce it? The only way you can reduce your detection risk is by doing more work. The only way you can reduce your detection risk is by doing more work. Carry out more procedure. So when we now say detection risk, that the auditor sampling, the way you carry out your activities is not going to detect material misstatement. Detection risk is the risk of failure to detect material misstatement from an item in the financial statement as a result of insufficient audit testing. Insufficient audit testing, whereby you do I have 100 population and I check maybe 70 of it. So the risk now that as a result of not checking the entire population, that is what we call detection risk. Detection risk is the risk of failure to detect material misstatement from item in the financial statement as a result of insufficient audit testing. So for you to reduce this risk, what you need to do is by do more tests, carry out more procedure. Please don't forget that. Detection risk is the risk of the risk of failure to detect a material misstatement from an item in the financial statement as a result of insufficient audit testing. So these detection risks can now arise as a result from two ways now. This risk can also be further broken down into two. Detection risk can be further divided into two. We have what we call sampling risk, and we also have what we call non-sampling risk. Please don't forget. These are the further These are the further classification of what? Detection risks. Detection risks, what is detection risks? Risks of what? Failure to detect material misstatement from the what? From the item in the financial statement. So this detection risk is now further divided into what? Into two. Sampling risks and what we call what? Non-sampling risks. From the word sampling, from the word non-sampling. So when we say sampling risk is the risk that the auditor conclusion based on the sample may be what? Different from the conclusion it had tested toward the entire population. That is, now when we say sampling, no, you are not checking the world, you are not checking the entire population. So the risk that will occur as a result of you not checking the world, the entire population, is what we call what? Is what we call sampling risk. Please don't forget this, my people. When we say what? Sampling risk. Sampling risk is the risk that the auditor conclusion on a word, on a sample may be different from the conclusion if you are what? If you have tested the entire what? The entire population. If you have tested the entire population, maybe you could have said another thing. Whether you could have said, oh, the financial statement does not give a true and fair view. But now you are not checking the entire population. The risks that occur as a result of you doing sampling, checking what, conducting sample, not checking the entire population is what we call what? Sampling risks. This will happen if the auditor, the sample is not a representative of the total population. So please don't forget that. Detection risk can be divided into what? Into two. Sampling and what? Not sampling. Sampling risks arise as a result of the auditor will give a wrong conclusion on the sample. The risks that occur as a result of you not checking the entire population. So assuming that you have checked the entire population, this risk would have not occurred. But there's no how. We can't eliminate this risk because we are not going to check everything. So, but the only way we can do this, the only way we can reduce this sampling rate is by doing more work, Increase your sample size. Then we also have what? We also have another, and let me also tell you, you see this sampling risk. Sampling risk can lead to what? To two wrong conclusions. Before I go, sampling risk arises as a result of what? The audit is a risk that the auditor conclusion based on the sample may be different from the conclusion if the entire population is checked. Let's say, for example, the entire population is 1,000. So I now decided to check 800. The risk that I'm going to face now as a result of not checking the entire 1,000. That is what we call sampling That's what we call sampling risk. So this sampling risk now cannot lead to two type of conclusion. It can lead to two type of conclusion that will be made by the auditor. One, the auditor can say that it shows a true and fair view. The auditor will give conclusion that the financial statement show a true and fair view. Mind you, it does not show a true and fair view. That is one conclusion that the auditor can reach. And the auditor can also say that not giving that the financial statement does not give a true and fair view. Mind you, the financial statement give a true and fair view. So sampling mix is going to lead to two conclusion. Two wrong conclusion that the auditor is going to give. The auditor can say that the financial statement show a true and fair view. Mind you, it does not show a true and fair view. And the auditor can say that the financial statement does not give a true and fair view. Mind you, the financial statement give a true and fair view. So sampling risk is going to lead to what? Is going to lead to wrong two type of conclusion. Don't forget that. The auditor can say that, oh, it give a true and fair view. Mind you, it does not give that. And the auditor can say that it does not, why the financial statement actually was show a true and fair. So sampling risk is going to lead to these two types of what conclusion. So the only way we can reduce this sampling risk is by what? Let's do more work. Let's do more work. Let's increase our sample size. But we are not still going to check the work. We are not still going to check the entire population. So we have the second one called what? Non-sampling risk. Non-sampling risk is the risk that the auditor form a what? Form a wrong conclusion other than reason from what? From sampling. That you form a word, you form a wrong conclusion, which is what? Which is unrelated to what? Which is unrelated to sampling risk. That the reason why you make this what? Wrong conclusion is not as a result of what? It is not, it is not as a result of what? Sampling. This one arise, this particular risk arise from what? From other source. It is not because that you did not check the entire population. That is why you have this risk. No. So non-sampling risk is the risk that the auditor reach what? Can incorrect what? Conclusion for reason other than what? For reading other than sampling. So that is what we call what? Non-sampling or non-sampling risk. Because this could only what? Occur due to what? Factors involving what? Error by the auditor or incompetence of the word of the audit team, or the need to work to a very tight deadline. In practice, non-sampling risk will usually be set at what? At zero. That we always assume that, oh, this one is not going to be what? It's not going to be possible. So that's why in practice, our what? Our non-sampling risk is usually what? It's usually zero. So please don't forget this. It is usually what? It's usually zero. And what we say what? Non-sampling risk, what do we mean? Non-sampling risk is a what? Is a risk that occur as a result of what? As a result of other reason. That is not what? That is not sampling. Maybe your audit team is not what? Is not competent. Maybe you have a what? You have a tight deadline. So these are what? These are what we call what? These are what we call sampling risk. Sampling risk arise as a result of what? Arise as a result of other reason apart from what? Apart from sampling. So what can cause what? Non-sampling risk is what we call what? Incompetence of your audit team. If you have a what? A tight deadline. And in practice, we usually assume that this particular one, because we can eliminate what? We can eliminate this non-sampling risk. We can eliminate it. And that's why in practice, we set it as what? At zero. So that means that we are assuming that this non-sampling risk does not what? Does not exist. So if you have a what? A good competent team, the word the time frame to complete it is what is okay. So I'm going to do a good job. All this non-sampling risk is not going to what? Is not going to occur. In order to what? In order to control detection risk, the auditor need to what? To control the what? The sampling. Now I make mention of this earlier. That before you, the way you can control these risks, the way you can what? You can reduce it is by what? Control your sample, increase your sample size. This means that detection risk is affected by the size of the sample and the way in which the sample is what? Is selected. So it is affected by this. And the only way have a what? Conduct a what? Have a good what? Sample. Increase the what? Samples so that all these type of risks will be what? It will be reduced. So please don't forget, these are what we are talking about. We are talking about sampling. Sampling is the application of audit procedure to less than what? To less than 100% within a what? Within a population. So detection risk, we have, this is not the first time we heard about detection. Detection is the risk of what? Failure to detect what? Material misstatement from an item in the what? In the financial statement. So this detection risk can now be further divided into two: sampling risks and non-sampling risks. So we now have what? We now have what we call, another thing that we need to talk about now is what we call what? Sampling risk and what? Statistical what? Sampling. Sampling risk and what? Statistical sampling. Auditor can never what? Can never be certain that a sample is fully representative of the population. Even if the auditor tells what? 999 out of the what? After the 1,000 invoice and find no audit problem. It could be that the remaining word single input which you did not check contain a what? Contain a material word, contain a material misstatement. So this is a problem of what sampling rates. So even though you check, we can see that it is only what? It is only one that is left. You didn't check it. There's also a risk that that one that you did not check. That's where the word, that's where the misstatement, that's where the word, the error is. As per what ISA 530, sampling what risk is the risk that the auditor conclusion based on the word, based on the sample may be different from the conclusion hadn't he tested the word, the entire word population. We'll talk about this as discussed above. This will happen if the risk is not representative of the word of the population as a whole. Sampling risk can lead to two types of words, incorrect word, incorrect decision. I think I've made mention of this earlier. For tests of control, the auditor are more what? That control are more effective than they actually what are. And for tests of detail, that the material misstatement does not what? Does not exist, even with what? Even it does. When we say for tests of control is that they have a bad internal control. Their internal control system is what is bad. So instead of your word, your test of control to show that what that this thing, that their internal control system is not strong, it is weak. Your test of control will say that it is what? It is strong. It is okay. Mind you, it does not okay. That's for test of control. For test of detail, that a material misstatement does not exist. There's no anything that what that is material. For test of what? For test of control is for what? Is for your internal control. Test of duty is for your what? Is for substantive test, where you what? You check the word, you check the item by yourself. So the auditor can make conclusion that the test of duty is what is okay. I did not find anything to be material. Mind you, there's something that is material. For tests of control, that control are less effective than they actually are, and for what? For tests of detail, that the material misstatement what exists when in fact it does not work. It's just the what? It's just the opposite of each other. I can say that their internal control system is what is strong. Mind you, it does not strong. I can say that the test of detail, that my test of detail, there's no what? There is no risk of material misstatement. Mind you, there's a risk of material misstatement. So it is a what? It is a two-way thing. So sampling risk is going to lead to what? To these two wrong conclusions. The auditor can say that the financial statement what? If your test of control and your test of detail, if you say that, okay, everything is fine, that means that you are going to say that the financial statement show a true and fair view. But mind you, it does not show a true and fair view. And if you conclude that your test of control and your test of details are what? Are not okay. Mind you, it may be what? It may be okay. So it leads to two things. Like this first one now, the auditor can say that the financial statement show a true and fair view. Mind you, it does not what? True and fair. True and fair view. That's what the two. The auditor can say that it does not what? It does not show. Mind you, the auditor can say that the financial statement show a true and fair view. Mind you, it does not show a true and fair view. And the auditor can also say that not what? It does not show a true and fair view. Mind you, the financial statement show a true. So is a what? Is a two-way thing. And what would determine this? What would determine this true and fair view is the what? Is the test that you have performed. The test that you are going to perform in audit is the what? Is just two. Your test of control and your test of duty. Your test of control relate to what? Testing the internal control. The test of what? Duty relate to what? Substantive test. We are still going to talk about that. Test of control relate with what? Internal control. Test of duty relate with what? Substantive what? Substantive test. So these are the two conclusions that the auditor is going to reach regarding what? In regarding sampling what? In regarding sampling risks. So and ISA 530 also distinguish between what? Two type of what? These two type of sampling. We have what we call what? Statistical what? Sampling, and we also have what we call what? Non-statistical what? Sampling. From the word statistical, what you need to have at the back of your mind is what is probability here. Here, under statistical sampling is based on what? Probability theory. While under this is based on what? Judgmental what? Does not based on what? Does not based on probability what? Sampling. You know, when we say probability, that what each of these item of the population, they have what? They have equal chance of what? Of being selected. Statistical sampling is any what? Is any sampling approach that involve what? Random selection and apply probability theory to the evaluation of the sampling result and the measurement of what? The measurement of the sampling rate. That is, under statistical what? Sampling, we apply what? We apply probability theory. Under what? Under non-statistical sampling, which sometimes we can also call what? Judgmental what? Judgmental sampling. Probability theory does not what? Does not allow. So instead, it is based on what? Judgment, judgmental opinion by the what? By the auditor about the result of the what? About the result of the sampling. So please don't forget, these are the what? Don't forget the key things here is about what? It's about probability. What differentiates what? Statistical what? Sampling from what? Non-statistical sampling is what? Is probability. In statistical sampling, we apply what? Probability theory. In non-statistical sampling, we apply what? No, we does not apply probability in what? In non-statistical. In statistical sampling, we apply what? Probability theory. So when you are not designing your what, your sample size, the sample size, design, size, and what selection of item for testing. These are the what, these are the remaining things that we need to talk about now. Sample size, sample what, sample design, size, and the what, the selection of what, the selection of item. Now we have what, when you want, if an auditor what, if an audit sampling exercise is to be effective, please don't forget, this is usually very what. And let me what, before I continue now, let me take you to one particular what, one particular diet where this particular aspect was also examined. So that's why I prepare what, I prepared this for you so that you also able to what, you're able to see it as well. Because this is a very what, this is a very important what, this is a very important topic for your work, for your exam that you need to what, that you need to pay attention to very, very well. Especially what, as you can see, audit evidence in what, look at here, sampling as well. Sampling is it. That was in May 20 what? May 2018. So please, it's a very what, is a very important aspect. Please pay attention to it. And what, this is what, please pay attention to this variable, this heading that we want to talk about. Sample design, size, selection, and what, an item for testing. If an audit sampling is to be effective, if sampling what risk is to be what, is to be reduced, and therefore detection is going to be reduced, because if the what, if the sample, you know, we usually say that what, not sampling risk is going to be what, in practice we set it at what, at 0, because not sampling risk is a risk that arises as a result of what, no what, it is not something that causes that. So in practice we set that to what, to 0. If sampling risk is to be what, is to be reduced, and therefore detection risk is going to be real, the auditor must design can appropriate what? The sample must be designed in an appropriate way. You have to design it very well. So when you are not designing your what, when you are designing your sample, the auditor is required by HR to what, to consider some of these issues. Please don't forget this. If you design your what, your sample very well, you design it very well, that is very well, that is very important. And if you design it very well, it's going to lead to what? A reduction in what? In detection risk. So when you are designing your what, your sample size, what are some of the things that you need to consider? Consider the purpose of the what, the audit procedure, and the population for which the what, the item will be what, it will be drawn. What is the what? What is the purpose of the procedure? Why do you have to do the what? Why do you have to design the what, the sample? That's one of the things. You know, there has to be a what, there has to be a reason for everything that we are doing. So why do you have to conduct a what? Why do you have to design a what? A sample? Why do you have to conduct a sample design on what? On inventory, on their what? On their receivable. Why? So you also need to what? Consider the purpose of the procedure and the what? The population in which the sample will be done. Determine what? Determine the sample size efficient to what? To reduce the what? The sampling risk to come what? Accepted what? Accepted level. So let's say you have a population of what? You have a population of 100 now. You can do what? You can do 70. You can do 80. so that the what, so that the risk will be what, it will be reduced. Because the only way you can reduce your detection risks, the only way you can reduce your detection risk is by doing more work, increase your sample size. So if you want to reduce the what, your risks, your detection risk, what are you going to do? Make sure that you have your what, effective what sample size. Select an item for the word item for the sample in such a way that each word sampling unit in the population has what, equal numbers, equal chance of being what, of being selected. And this is what we call what, random what, this is what we call random selection. This is what we call what, random what, selection. So please don't forget, my people, what are the words, what are the things that you need to consider when you are designing your word, your sample. When designing sample, according to ISA what 530, what do we require auditor to do? Have understanding, understand the word, consider the purpose of the procedure, and the word, the population. What determine the word, the sample size that will be what, that will be appropriate. Then do your what, select item from the word, from the sample in a what, in a random select, use a random selection. That's what we are saying in this third one. Use what, random word selection. Because when random selection is that what, each word item within the population have what, equal chance of being selected. So use a random selection, determine what, a sample size that is sufficient to reduce your what, detection risk to the barest minimum. Understand the what, consider the purpose of the audit procedure. So please, these are very, very important. Auditor will therefore have to make a what, a number of key decisions. Auditor will have to make a what, a numbers of what, a numbers of key decisions regarding this what, regarding this design of what, of sampling. What are the some of the decisions that you are likely to, that you need to make? Auditor will therefore have to make a what, a numbers of what, a numbers of key decisions. So please don't forget this. Please don't forget this. Please don't forget. It is very important. Please don't forget that. This is a very important aspect. Please take it very important. So what are the key decisions that the auditor is going to make? The sampling approach that you're going to use, whether it is what, statistical or what, not statistical. Statistical, we are going to use probability. Not statistical, we are not going to use what, probability of it. So you need to determine the approach that you're going to go for, whether it is what that, and it can be sampling method can be divided into two. We can have what we call what, statistical, and we can also have what, non-statistical sampling. Under statistical sampling, we use what, probability theory. Under non-statistical, we do not use what, probability what, theory. And under statistical what, sampling, we have three type of what, we have three type of sampling. We have what we call what, random sampling. Let me open a pamphlet. Sampling approach can be divided into what, also we can even say what, sampling method. Sampling method, or sometimes we call it what, sampling approach, can be divided into two. We can have what we call what, statistical sampling. Statistical sampling. And we can also have what we call what, no statistical sampling. So the second one now, we can have what we call what, non-statistical sampling. No statistical sampling. No statistical sampling. So each of these now cannot be divided into what, we cannot still have many what. So these are the two. Sampling can arise in any of these. So in a statistical sampling, what are the type of sampling that have what, that use element of what, probability? Random sampling. We also have what we call what, systematic sampling. Systematic sampling. We also have what we call what, monetary monetary units. So these are the words, these are the three types of sampling that is mentioned in what ISA 530 under what? Under statistical sampling. Random sampling, systematic sampling, and monetary unit sampling. Under what? Under non-statistical, we have what we call what? Block selection sampling. Block selection what? Block selection sampling. And we also have another one called what? Haphazard sampling. So these are the what? These are the two type of what sampling under what? Under non-statistical. That is those that does not use probability theory. Statistical sampling use what? Probability theory. So one of the decisions that the auditor have to make is that what are you going to, which sampling approach are you going to use? Is it statistical or is it what? Is it non-statistical sampling? We are going to be talking about some of this. The sample selection what? The sample selection method. Okay, sorry, the characteristics of the population from in which the sample is to be what? Is to be drawn. The characteristics of the what? The population from which the sample will be what? It will be drawn. The characteristics of the population. And what we are saying characteristics in terms of what? They have to be very identical. So if I say that, okay, if I want to conduct a sample on this particular segment now, that means that what? That on those items, they have to have what? They have to be homogeneous. They have to be homogeneous among the world. The population has to be homogeneous in terms of what? They are related. So if all the population in this particular segment now, let me say for what? For inventory now, there has to be homogeneous in this segment, meaning that the inventory, they are what? They are the same. So if they have what? If they have different type of inventory, that means that that's a what now? Each of them have a what? A subpopulation. So maybe your inventory now, you have a what? You have different items. So in each of these different items now, I can divide them into what? A subgroup. So it is in this subgroup now or a subpopulation that I will not conduct my sample size, because I can't just match all the items together if they did not have the same characteristics. So it is very, very important. Characteristics of the population from which the sample is to be drawn. The sample selection what? The sample selection method. Are you using random? Are you using what? Are you using systematic? Are you using what? Monetary, haphazard, and the block selection? What constitutes a what? A misstatement or a what? A deviation? You have to ask yourself. What is your tolerable what? Misstatement? What is your what? Your expected rate of what? Of misstatement? You need to ask yourself this. The sample, okay, are you using systematic? Are you using random? When we ask what constitutes a misstatement or a deviation? In terms of what? What constitutes a what? A misstatement. What constitutes a what? A misstatement. In terms of maybe if you see this, that will show that, oh, there's a what? There's a misstatement. So what constitutes a misstatement? You need to ask yourself. Here now we are referring to like what? Probability, materiality. What constitutes a misstatement? We are saying what constitutes what? Materiality. What is your tolerable what? Misstatement? What is your tolerable misstatement? Because your tolerable is that you have to set this. Tolerable that, oh, if I find anything maybe among the document now, I have the population is 100, I'm checking 70. If I see what? If I see 10, that is what that it contains misstatement, that may not be what? That may not be material. So you as the auditor, you have to have this at the back of your mind as well. What is your tolerable what? Rate of misstatement? That if my tolerable rate of misstatement, let's say it is what? It is 10%. So if I have what? If I have anything greater than what? 10%, that means that I have to what? We have to raise a query. My tolerable misstatement. That, you know, when we are writing a project, we have what we call this thing, significant level, whereby I will assume that, okay, in this project now, there's going to be what? A 5%. 5%, right? So that means that everything that I'm saying now is what is 99%. So me at the back, when I'm starting the project, I also need to start what is my tolerable what? What is my tolerable misstatement? What is the expected misstatement? That is what am I expecting? If I've set my own, oh, this is my tolerable, then what is the expected? Maybe I'm out of the world. Let's say I set 10%. So if I see what, if I see 8 and this is not what, it is not bad. So please, these are key decisions that the auditor need to make. Please don't forget this. The sampling approach, the characteristics of the population, the sample selection method that you are using, what constitutes a misstatement, the tolerable misstatement, and your expected misstatement, or the rate of the rate of the deviation. All of these decisions will influence your sample times. All these decisions will influence your sample. So you have to be very, very careful when making some of these decisions during your audit process. Now let's not talk about statistical and non-statistical sampling. Let's talk about the benefit and the disadvantage of this. The statistical sampling are widely used. And when we say statistical sampling, what are we talking about? We use what? We use probability We use probability theory. Statistical sampling use what? Use probability Use probability theory. Where each item in the population have equal chance of being selected. So what is now the benefit of statistical sampling? Please, this has been tested before. If you check any of these past questions, you are going to see it. What is the benefit? Statistical sampling provides an objective, mathematical, precise basis for the sampling process. The required sample size can be calculated using probability technique. When we say statistical sampling, which word we use the probability theory. So what's now the benefit of statistical sampling now? We say statistical sampling provide objective in mathematics. That we are not it's not subjective. It's not because I'm using a judgmental sampling now. Where okay, I did not like this one, I will select this. Oh, you come. No, every item within the population under statistical sampling have equal chance of being selected. So it is it is objective. It is objective. You also have the required sample size can be calculated prescribed using a mathematical technique. There may be a circumstance where statistical sampling is the only means of auditing efficiently. For example, in the case of a large population of items. At least if the population is large, the only way that you can do this that will be effective is using a statistical sampling. So please don't forget these are the benefits. It is objective and it can be easily calculated using the probability technique. It is good for for a large organization. So everything that have advantage, you also have disadvantage. Disadvantage of statistical sampling now. The degree of training and technical expertise is required if the auditor to use the statistical sampling technique very well. It require you training, and you have to be experts for you to able to use this particular method of sampling. This requires an investment in the necessary training for audit, and in terms of what we are talking about here is cost. Because when you give training, it is not through the word of mouth, man. There has to be there's a monetary attached to it. Sample size can be large than judgmental approach, thus increase the time and the cost involving the audit. One of the advantage that we make mention of earlier of statistical sampling, that it is good for a large organization. So sample size may be large than the judgmental. Thus it increase the time that we are going to spend it. But if it is judgmental, well, just let me pick 5, let me pick 10, then I'll go. But here it is it consumes time, and as a result of that, it is what it's expensive. So you can say time, you can say like the training that we talk about here too. This training, you can attach what? You can attach element of cost to it. So training and what technical expertise is one. Cost, that is training of your what? Training of your audit staff. The sample size is what? Is time as well. It's going to what? It's going to consume time. Some auditors take the view that it is what? It is preferable to rely on the skills, experience, and the judgment of the auditor rather than what? Mathematical, statistical, what? Mental. At least the auditor, you can use your word, you can use your discretion, you can use your professional judgment. So rather than what? Leaving it to what? To mathematical method. The ones you have the word, you have the experience, you have the skills about that what? About that particular what? Audit process. You can use your word, you can use your judgment. That's one of the word. That's one of the advantage of what principle based as a word. It require what? It require professional word judgment. No, we make mention of this earlier. What is going to determine the word, the amount of audit evidence that you need? It is what? It is it is a area of what? Professional judgment. So sample selection method now. ISA 530 requires the auditor to select a sample in such a way that each item in the population, the sample unit has equal chance of being selected. So that means that ISA 530 is even advocating for for statistical sampling, because it is under statistical sampling that each item within the population have equal chance of being selected. So a wide range of sample method is available to the auditor, that is under statistical sampling. These are other method that the auditor need to use. We have what we call random, we have what we call systematic, and we also have what we call haphazard sampling. Random sampling. All items in the population have equal chance of selection. This is typically achieved by the use of random number for the selection. This is one of the method of statistical sampling. Let me say random in terms of let's say to some of us that we are made now, maybe we are playing a PS game now. You can say, well, okay, let's select random. So random now in terms of I'm not choosing the team that I'm going to use when I'm playing the game. My opponent is not going to use so it is it is a computer that will give us that will give us the team. So random in terms of all the club, they have equal chance of being selected. That is random sampling. We also have what we call systematic sampling. Systematic sampling. With systematic sampling, a random starting point is chosen from the population. And the item are selected with a stand cap within the between them. For example, every 10 items. And I'm going to show you example of this now. Very soon. And we also have what we call haphazard. Haphazard sampling. The auditor select the sample of the sample on arbitrary basis. For example, choosing any 100 invoice from a file. This is not a statistical valid method, and the resulting sampling may contain a degree of bias. It is therefore not recommended to use with a statistical I told you this earlier, that sampling can be divided into two. We have what we call okay, let me take you back a little bit. I think I noted it down. Look at this place. Look at this note. I make mention of this earlier, that sampling can be divided into two. We have what we call a sampling method, or we call it average. We have what we call statistical sampling, that's one. And we also have what we call non-statistical sampling. Under statistical sampling, we use element of probability. So these are the three type of what? These are the three type of sampling units under what? These are three type of what sampling under statistical. We can use random in terms of what? Use element of probability. We can use what? Systematic, and we can also use what? Monetary what? Monetary units. Under what now? Under non-statistical, we have what we call the blood selection, and we also have what we call the what? The haphazard. You understand? So this haphazard is just what? It's just an arbitrary what? Arbitrary selection of what? Of item. So these random and what? Systematic sampling are what? Are example of what? Are example of random and systematic are example of statistical sampling. Why this haphazard is a what? It's an example of what? And hold on, let me share you something now so that you see. So now look at this one, look at this method of sampling. Now we have what we call random, systematic, monetary, haphazard, and the block section. So now what I want to do from here is that let me show you the word example of this. Now when we say random selection, we say that this method of sampling ensures that items within the population stand the word equal chance of being selected by using the word the random table or random number generator. The sampling word unit can be what? Physical items such as what? Sage invoice and the word monetary unit. So now let me not tell you the word example of what? Systematic sampling now. And that's the reason why we can do this. Systematic word sampling, they say this method divide the numbers of sampling into a what? Into a population. Into the word. This method divide the numbers of sampling units within the what? A population into a what? A sample size to generate a what? A sampling interval. Now look at this example now. You are the auditor of what? Jones Co. and you are undertaking a what? A substantive test on the what? The sales for the year ended 31st December 2010. You have what? You have established that the source documentation that initiate the what? The sales transaction is used. Sales transaction is the goods dispatch what? Note. And you have obtained duties of the first and the last goods what? Goods dispatch note. Arising in the what? In the year to what? To 31st December 2010, which are number 110,000 to what? To 15,000 what? Respectively. Now, the random what? The random number generator as suggests to start at what? 42. And the sample size is what? Is 50. You would therefore start from what? From goods dispatch number what? You know, the random what? The random number that you generated start with what? With 42. And the sample size is what? The sample size is 50. So you now start checking now from what? On 10,402. Which means that the word, okay, which numbers is from what? That means that this goods dispatch note now for this year started from what? From 10,000 to what? To 15,000 naira. No, to 15,000. So that means that we have what? We have 5,000 what? We have 5,000 dispatch note during the what? During the year. So if the random number generated suggested that it is what? It is 42 and the sample size is what? Is 50. So that means that the word you would therefore start from what? Goods dispatch node of what? And then sample every word 100 what? Goods dispatch node thereafter till the word the sample size of what? 50. Till you have what? You have checked 50. And let me also explain another one for you, which is not in what? Which is not in your what? In your pack as well. We have what we call what? Monetary what? Monetary unit sampling. This method of sampling is what? Is value-weighted selection. Thereby, the sample size selection and evaluation will result in a what? A conclusion in monetary amount. These have to do with what? These have to do with more monetary terms now. The objective of monetary unit sampling is to what? Is to determine the accuracies of what? Financial accounts. The step involved in what monetary units are to what? Determine the sample size, select the sample, perform your audit procedure, then evaluate the results and arrive at the what? And arrive at a conclusion about the population, whether the population actually what show a true and fair view. Monetary unit sampling is based on what attributes what sampling technique, and it is often used to test the control and appropriate when each sample can be placed into one or two classification, exemption or what? No exemption. No worry, I'll give you a good diagram now that you're going to see relating to this. So just hold on before we finish the class. We see what example of how this monetary unit sampling is being conducted. So now, what constitutes a misstatement? That's one of the key decision that you as the auditor you have to make as what. What constitutes a misstatement? It's a 530 requirement of the auditor to consider the purpose of the purpose of the audit procedure. Means that the auditor need a clear understanding of what constitutes a misstatement. What constitutes a misstatement? Meaning of misstatement and deviation are only set in what is a 530 in context of what? Tolerable misstatement, or sometimes we call it rate of deviation. What constitutes a misstatement is the difference between the tolerable and the rate of deviation. What constitutes just like when we say tolerable. The difference between tolerable misstatement, or sometimes we call it rate of deviation, is what we call misstatement. So if I say my tolerable is 10, or the rate of deviation that I expected to occur is 10. So anything above that now will constitute a misstatement. If I say my rate of tolerable now, I expect a mistake of 10 voucher. Okay, let's say for example like that. That is my tolerable level. That's what I can accept it. Because I need to have it at the back of my mind that everything cannot show everything cannot show a true and fair view. So if I now have anything above my tolerable level that I have set during the sampling process, that will now constitute a misstatement. A tolerable misstatement is a monetary amount set by the auditor in order to address the risk that the total of the individual immaterial misstatement may cause the financial statement to be materially misstated. It is the application of performance materiality. What we are saying here is that this tolerable misstatement is set by the auditor. So it is set by the auditor in order to address the risk that the total of the individual material misstatement may cause the financial statement to be materially misstated. So this, let me still continue using this example. I can say that I expect 10 rate of deviation. So that means that I expect 10 to be misstated. And these 10 now, they are immaterial. So anything above this now, anything above this rate of deviation is what we call that will lead to that will lead to misstatements. Oh, I expect, it can be it can be error free. It can be error free. So if I'm expecting to have 10 error, that is that's my tolerable. That's what I can accept. So, and I will consider that to be immaterial. So if I now have anything to be greater than 10 now, that is material. I have to start investigation on that. expected misstatement or a rate of what deviation. The auditor will also need to what to form a judgment on the amount of misstatement or a rate of what deviation that may be what expected to arise in the population. The higher the expected what misstatement or the rate of deviation, the greater the required what sample size. In terms of what if the expected deviation is what is high, I expected like what 20, I expected like 50. What I need to do now is that I need to do what? The sample size has to be what? Has to be increased so that we're able to check what? Are able to check more documents. And what is going to give me a clue about the what? About how I'm going to determine this rate of what deviation? Is there what? Is there internal control? If their internal control is good, then I will assume that, okay, the misstatement that is going to occur, my rate of misstatement or deviation is going to be what? Is going to be low. But if their internal control is weak, then we are going to set this what? To be high. The amount of expected misstatement or a rate of deviation may be based on what? Some of these factors. The experience of the world of the population from previous audit will be the experience that we have from previous audit. The experience from the world from the current audit area relating to the world relating to the population. So now performing what? Performing audit procedure on the what? On the sample that you have selected. When designing a sample, the auditor is required by what? ISA 530 to perform appropriate what? Appropriate audit procedure on each of the what? The selected item. If the audit procedure is not applicable to selected item, the auditor must perform the audit on the what? On replacement what? On replacement item. For example, the auditor might select a sample of what? Of check to test for evidence of what? Of authorization. One of those might be a check which has been what? Has been cancelled. Provided the check has been what? Legitimately and properly cancelled, then the auditor may choose another what? Another check number to test in its what? In its place. Okay, we have, you know, when we call it what? We call it what? Audit should perform what? If the audit procedure is not applicable on the selected item, the audit must, so the selected item now is what? Is check. I'm checking this particular check now for what? For authorization and approval. But this particular check number has been what? Has been cancelled. What are you going to do now? The auditor must perform procedure on what? On replacement basis. Okay, if you cancel the check, the next one is what? That means that, okay, if check 101 is what? Is cancelled, I want to check 101 for authorization and approval like that. Then I discover that this particular voucher is what? Is cancelled. Then what I need to do next is to do what? Is to go to the next one, check 102, and check the what? If the authorization and approval is what? Is there. So I'm going to perform procedure on what? On replacement what? On replacement item. If the auditor is unable to apply the what? The procedure or a suitable alternative to the selected item, for example, because the document has been stolen, that item must be treated as a what? As a misstatement or a what? Or a deviation. If the auditor is unable to apply the what? The procedure on what? Suitable what? Or suitable what? Alternative to the selected item, the item must be treated as a what? As a misstatement or a what? Or a deviation. Auditor is also required to what? To investigate the what? The nature and the causes of any misstatement. What caused it? You don't just assume and you go, even though you set the what? The level already, that you expected a 10 mistake to occur. Then if you have expected that as well during your what? Your sampling process, then you also need to what? Investigate that what caused that. Is it as a result of bad internal control or something like that? If the auditor consider that the misstatement or deviation can be what? Nominal, he must obtain a what? A higher degree of what? Certainty about this and perform additional procedure to obtain what? In terms of what? If you discover that what? If you discover that a misstatement or a deviation can be what? Anomalous, he must what? He must obtain High degree of what? High degree of evidence. High degree of evidence about what? About it. And perform what? Additional what? Additional procedure. And let me explain what? Let me explain this thing. You know, when we say something is what? When we say something is abnormal, that is a deviation. That is, this one is what? There's a deviation from what is expected. In terms of what, if there's the what, your deviation can be what? Can be abnormal. When we say this term now means that if a deviation is what? Is regarded what? Is regarded normal. When we say something is what? That means that it is what? It is normal. So you know that's my word, that is my deviation. My deviation means that okay, it is what I expected this. But if I now expected something that is what? Abnormal, it means that it is what? Something that is unusual, that is what? That is strange, that is not what? It is not what I was expecting before. So if I'm expecting what? 10 now to be what? To be wrong, and I have what? And I have 15 now. That means that 5 is what? 5 is what? Abnormal now. 5 is what? Is unusual. I was not expecting it. So if you have such situation, you need to perform what? You must obtain a what? A high degree of what? Certainty about this, and perform what? Additional procedure on that what? On that 5. So please don't forget this. Don't forget this. Performing audit on what? On procedure. These are some of the things that you need to do according to what is 530. So please don't forget this. This is a very, very important. Performing procedure, don't forget that. Don't forget the word, don't forget the some of these words. These are the words, these are the 3 that was mentioned in your part, which is what? Random sampling. Don't forget the meaning of random sampling. Don't forget the meaning of what? Systematic hyperhazard. The other one that I'm showing you now is what? Just for your own one, for your own knowledge sake, which is what we have, what we call block. You can read it as well. Block selection method. This method of selection involves selecting a block of a what? A contiguous item within the what? Within the population. Block selection is very rare in what? Modern what? Auditing, merely because a what? A valid reference cannot be made beyond the what? The period or the block exam. An example of block selection is where the auditor may what? May examine all the remittance from customer in a month of what? Of January. Similarly, the auditor may only what? Examine remittance advice that are what? Number to what? 300 to what? To 400. You can see this example is very, very what? It is very, very clear now. So you can read about these 2 other one as well. The one that is not here is the what? Is the monetary and the what? And the block. The random, the systematic, and the what? The hyperhazard is there in the syllabus as well. So don't forget the word, the advantage and what disadvantage of what statistical sampling. Please don't forget, it is very, very important. I have seen it before in the past question. Please don't forget this. Advantage and disadvantage of what statistical sampling. What are some of the issues that you need to consider? What are the key decisions that you need to consider when you're developing your work, when you're developing your sample, the purpose, what sample size is sufficient to reduce the sampling rate, and use the systematic sampling where what item in the population that have the equal chance of being selected. You need to ask yourself, what is the approach are you going to use? Are you using systematic or are you using what? Not systematic? The characteristics of the population, the sample selection method, the misstatement or a deviation, tolerable, expected. So those are decisions that the auditor need to make when you are what when you are doing something. Please don't forget to do that. Sampling risk can be what can lead to wrong conclusion. The auditor can say that the financial statement show a true and fair view, and mind you, the financial statement does not show a true and fair view and bias versa. We have what we call detection risk. Detection risk can be divided into two. We have what we call what sampling risk, and we also have what we call what non-sampling risk. Sampling risk arises as a result of not checking the entire population. So non-sampling risk arise as a result of what other factors, maybe incompetence of your auditing, lack of what the tight audit deadline. So those are what we call, and in practice we said what non-sampling risk should be what to be zero. Please don't forget this. So let me take you what May 2018. Please check this at the end of this or at the end of this class. May 2018, question 7. It relates with what sampling. Relate with what relate to sampling. So let's do what let me see go through another where sampling was also tested. And see all this working paper is there again. It's a very, very important. You have this document, please check it. Let me just look at where sampling was tested. Audit working paper is also very, very important. Please take care of that as well. I think I saw something in I don't know what my last friend. So please just check it after the class. Anyway, that is what something, go through the word, go through the note again. It's a very, very important chapter. Evidence and what? Evidence and something. In evidence, the key things that we talk about is that what? Relevant, please don't forget them. Under evidence, we started this class from what? From evidence. What is evidence? We started from what? Evidence. The key thing that you need to know that please don't forget in that area. Don't forget what the principle of relevance. Don't forget the principle of what? Reliability. Don't forget what? Assertion. Don't forget the way we can generate what? Evidence. And don't forget the 5-1, which is what about if the evidence is not sufficient? What are some of the things that you are going to do? So please don't forget those 5 key things under what? Evidence, which is the first unit that we talk about in this particular chapter. Don't forget the principle of relevance. Don't forget the principle of reliability. Don't forget what? Assertion. Don't forget what? The way we generate evidence. What about if the evidence is not sufficient? What are you going to do? Then we move on to what? To documentation. Don't forget what is the reason for documentation. What is the reason why you need to have a working paper? What are the important? They are the same. Whether reason or important of having all the documentation, they are the same. Don't forget the 2 categories. We have what we call the current, and we also have what we call the permanent. What are the content of the current working paper? What are the content of the permanent working paper? Don't forget the computer-based working paper. In terms of what are the advantages that you're going to derive when you use computer to prepare your working paper. Don't forget the features. It's very, very important that every working paper must have. It must have the name of the client, who prepare it, the day that you prepare it, who review it, the day that you review it. Please don't forget those features of every working paper. Don't forget that, please. Then we move on to sampling as well. Don't forget the what's the meaning of what sampling risk, what's the meaning of what non-sampling risks. So what are the sum of the what are the sum of the decision that the auditor need to make regarding what? Regarding this. Okay, where is that? Please. Statistical and not statistical. What are the what is this particular aspect? Don't forget them, they are very important, please. The decision that you need to make is read this particular aspect very well. Don't forget the word, don't forget this as well. The advantage and the word, the disadvantage here is unforgettable. So thank you very much, and God bless you all. So before we go, let me show you this, which is what we call what. No, I promise that before the end of the world, when the end of the class, I will show you how we do what, how we do monetary unit sample. So just have a what, have a look at it. Although this is not your what, this is not yourself, but it is what. But exam is not just about what is, it's about what we understand what is related. So this is something what you the sample monetary unit sampling. And let's say now we have invoice value. Invoice one now, we have what the value is what is 80. The cumulative invoice value will also be what? To also be 80. We have the second one, 70. Then the cumulative now is what? 80 plus what? 80 plus 70, that's what? 150. 150 plus what? 150 plus 400, you have what? You have 550. Let's now say now that you want to what? You want to check what? Okay, let me take it down. And then put some this right now. You can just screenshot this. That we have a list of what? Let's say customer invoice 80, 40, 400, and 90. All the way down to what? Down to 380, which is what? Which is the last number here now. The right hand column is the what? Is the table for cumulative, which you can see it already. So the first one is what? Is 80, then 80. That the cumulative will still what? Will still be 80. Then plus 70, which is what? 150 now. Then plus what? Plus 150, which is what? 400. So if I say what? 450 plus what? 400 plus 150, that's what now? That's 550. 550 plus 90, and so till we what? Till we get to this what? Till we get to this final level. If you want to look at what? 4 invoice now out of those receivable, let's say this is what? This is a receivable now. This is what? This invoice, it relates to what? To receivable that we sell, but the customer is still what? They are still yet to pay. We went to look at what? 4 what? Receivable of those what? 4 out of those receivable. So you take the total. You take the total, and if the word, if we grant it to what? To 500, then divide it by what? By 4. That means that you have what? You have 1,000 what? 1,150. And that's what they did here. You can say this. 500, we can round it up. 500 to divide, we will have this word, we will have this 1,125. So after what? 605 plus 1,250, it will be what? 1,000 what? It will be 1,885 plus 1,255. So that is how we are going to continue. Just have a snapshot of this. The thing that you can just read at your leisure time. It is not something that's going to stress you. I just want you to have what understanding and see how monetary unit what sampling look at. So thank you very much, and let's go.